to another episode of In.SYNC, our podcast that is
Yay!
Business, spirituality, and everything in between. At the age of 30-something, right? Now I can say it. Kat finally turned 30 as well, and I'm not the only old person here. So we can share our lifelong wisdom with you.
I just want to jump right in there. 30 is not old.
So today we are talking about how to thrive in a competitive business environment as a spiritual person. And in order to get started, and if you did not listen to our first episode, I just wanted to wrap up why we're talking about this, or why we feel entitled to share our challenges and learnings with you guys. Kat used to work in strategy consulting the last years and had her startup within the last
Why
year.
we feel entitled.
Yeah, I mean, I always think like, how dare you talking about it if you never went through it personally, right? So I don't want to, one thing I don't want to talk about in this episode about things we don't know and experienced ourselves, right? So that's why the entitlement. Okay. So my ego wants to clarify that.
All clear.
And me myself, I am still working, and that's what I did the last years, working in the startup environment, which is basically also very competitive and very male driven. And both of us are a very spiritual person in the sense that we are very much aligned with our purpose and what feels good to us, and our happiness and freedom is our most important our most important values in life. And it's often like I got often asked how it is as a woman in this atmosphere, in this male dominated atmosphere. But it's not about being a woman, it's just how you deal with it if all your surroundings are more or less tailored to winning, being the stronger one, the faster one, the one that raises more money or makes more money, and how you still have the ability to stay true to yourself. And yeah, this is what we want to cover in today's episode. You want to get right started and share maybe a bit about your experience and how it was for you in strategy consulting specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So as Tanya said, I spent a few years in strategy consulting. I worked for Deloitte and a smaller boutique consultancy when I just started off. So I was in consulting for over 5 years, and consulting, as most of you or many of you probably know, is a very competitive environment. But I was on top of that aligned to capital markets operations. So I was working for the big banks, which have a whole different level of competitiveness to them.
I need to ask you like a question already. I never asked you that in the beginning, but since we know each other, but like I always was like questioning, why would you work in that environment, and specifically in that like with banks and stuff? Because I feel that you're a person, or I know actually I can say that you have very high values about yourself and about the impact in life you have. You're vegan yourself, you know, all those things that we're trying not to harm the planet, so to say, and being very conscious about how we live. So what made you even go into that kind of environment in the first place if these are so like values that are so far from yours?
Yeah. So first of all, I think I've always had these values, but I wasn't always fully aware of them. And I think once I started to embrace them more, that is when I naturally made my way out of this environment. But how I got into it, I studied, I did my master's in London, and London is a city of financial services, right? And I always thought that, you know, consulting is a good way to enter the workforce, because I didn't really know like, where do I want to be? And I kind of just ended up in banking. So there's so much banks in London. So that's how I got into it by chance, really. I mean, consulting was a choice, but then financial services was definitely not where I would say I want to go for this. Although I do remember being kind of proud of being on that side of, you know, things, because it was a bit prestige back then, or it still is, right? And when you, again, like I wasn't always that spiritual and like that, you know, I wasn't always that aware of my ego, and that was definitely an ego thing.
Now that you mentioned it, I actually remember all your like Louis Vuitton purchases.
Yeah, I was very
necklaces. Wow, who were you back then? Why were we friends?
Thanks, Tanya, because you were the same.
No, I mean, you didn't.
You
just wanted to.
You had a walk-in closet, you know, with all sorts of stuff. So
Cheap
I didn't
stuff.
have that.
Also bad. Anyways, yeah.
Never mind, your money went somewhere. Your money went into 20 items. My money went into one item.
Oh my God. Yeah, that by the way comes back to the trip that we did to London where you wanted to go to Burberry, right? This is the only thing you wanted to have this trench coat.
Yes, and
wow.
you made such a pressure to get this Burberry trench, and then so you could go to Topshop, and I was like, okay, anyway.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good
us.
reminder, and that's a good reminder of where we are coming from. So it's not always, and I think this is also very important to remember, because for example, my mom also keeps telling me, she'd be like, but you weren't always like that, and I say to myself, I was like, yeah, I was. And she's like, no, you were not. And that makes me think, and I truly believe that deep within I was always like that, as in always I always knew what my values were, but I wasn't embracing them. And again, this is part of the journey. And for sure, when I started out in consulting, I was super proud to having landed this job, to working with HSBC, UBS, all of the big ones, flying to New York for a project for 3 days makes no sense, all of being in Zurich for half year, all of these things. I was super proud of that. But then also, when you look at the timeline, when I started meditating is pretty much when I entered that job, and I think this is when my spiritual journey started. I landed my job in, I think it was September or so. And in February or March, the following year, I started meditation. So I do transcendental meditation, which is a mantra-based meditation. And as it happens, it's also been done by like a lot of world leaders, but I didn't know that back then. And I didn't have any like mental struggles or so, but I kind of sensed that being in this environment might actually put me off a track that I don't want to go to. And so I never wanted to find myself in a burnt out situation and then meditate. I was like, right, I don't want to even get there. So I need to find a tool to do this. And I was, this meditation cost like £500 back then. And I couldn't afford it. And my mom purchased it for me, which was the best investment. If you think about that, this is crazy, right? You start as a consultant, you work in the most prestigious companies of this world, you don't earn enough money. And still people do it for the recognition. And this is what I find so interesting. And when you have that view of, okay, there's something maybe more to life or so, maybe it's not just this, I was like, why do people get so attached with their roles and with their titles? As a matter of fact, you don't earn like the world, at least not in the beginning. And I mean, you do later on, but not in the beginning. And so people get really attached with their titles and they define themselves. And then when you go on dates and stuff, and people tell you, oh, I'm this vice president, and I was like, that's your job title. That's not, who you are. And yeah, exactly. And so I think,
But do you remember, like, I don't know what position you are, but like when we talked about it about a couple of years ago, what's your plan is? I mean, you're always like, and that goes back to your German roots, I think, a very planned, truly person that always had like the goals and have a very much like a career plan ahead, which I never had, right? And you always said like, yeah, I have a couple of years there, and then you wanted to have a bank director or something like that. So you had like the things back then that were important for you, that you were like, yeah, I can do that because I'm making a lot of money.
Yeah, hey, for sure.
Crazy.
For sure. And I think there's a lot of fear speaking out of me as well, because I always, at this time where I said I'm going to be like a bank director, or I'm going to work for a bank or so instead of consulting, this was a very short period, because my bigger plan was always to go back into startups and like do my own thing. So I always had that in the back of my mind, and eventually, that's what I'm doing now. But there was definitely a period where I also got carried away by that whole environment, and then you see, okay, I'm not making money now, but I will be making money then. And then there was this false assumption that I had in my mind that if I reach this point, then I can start living. Right? Exactly. This is a typical fear-driven toxic thought, and I wanted to kind of prevent myself. So I was finding all sorts of ways to like not get misled by that ego thing and perception. But yeah, I mean, topic is of this podcast specifically is how to thrive as a spiritual person, right? And
but then back then you have not even been like a more developed spiritual person. So what was do you have anything that says, okay, back then that really helped me? If you saw like your colleagues working long hours and it was all about status besides meditation, do you think what was it that actually gave you the confidence to say, no, I'll do it differently?
Yeah. So I always looked for my why, like, why am I doing this even? Because if the obvious facts are this is kind of a toxic environment and you don't earn like a lot of money and everyone's nasty, then the obvious question is like, what are you even doing there? And I think I've always asked myself the questions, and what people call journaling is probably what I do. Is like I write down, why do you do this, or why do you want to stay in this job? Why do you let this person talk to you like this? And so I would try to give me answers to that, and I find that immensely helpful because for example, my why would I even be in this environment is because I realized I learn an incredible amount of skills, and I learn so much in like by seeing so many different companies. If I go anywhere else, I won't have the same exposure. That was my biggest why. And the other why was, for example, I'm in London. Like, I loved my life in London. I had amazing friends. I still have amazing friends there. I loved the lifestyle. I was successful in the way that, I was doing well in the job. Therefore, I got presented more opportunities. Therefore, I could learn more. Therefore, I could grow more. Therefore, I knew I could go out of it quicker. So that was my why. But then as soon as the why was served, I again asked myself, why are you doing this? Then I was going up to manager promotion, and it was a completely nasty environment again. And it just got to, and I asked myself, why are you here? And do you want to do this long term? And the answer was no. And then that's when I made the jump. So how can you do this? How can you be in an environment like that? Is by being very clear on why you're there. And also knowing when that why has been served, and then moving on or finding yourself a different role in that environment also.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I can share a bit how I perceived it. I mean, for me, it was always completely different because I never felt, and this is maybe because I would never say to myself that I'm a competitive person. I don't believe in competition per se. Yes, on the market, maybe a bit, but I always feel that there's enough place or there's a place for everyone in anything what they do. And in the startup scene, what I actually felt was the best part is that there is a lot of like support. So it wasn't, it was just like people that are there for you. They wanted to have the best. You have a lot of free access to a lot of like people knowledge, networks, tools, everything. However, it is obviously about being faster and better and raising more money. And I think what really helps, and I need to just align with that, knowing your values and why you do things and why you want to build things. And I led an accelerator for the last 4 years, and I worked a lot with like young entrepreneurs and first-time founders. And I think the one thing I saw, which is like the number one thing why people survive in this thing, is because they have a strong reason why they're doing it. They know they want to solve a problem. They know they want to do something better for the world in any sense, with any product, with any service they are launching. And therefore, you just love what you do. And it's then not about the competition anymore. It's just about building something that is sustainable and having an impact and is solving a problem for tons of people, hopefully, at some point. And I think just being aligned with that really helps a lot in terms of not seeing things personally. And then just, for me, at least, what I can speak of is whatever I build it not because of ego, not because of status, not because of success, achievement, or anything around that, but because I really believed in the product or the service I wanted to do. And so I saw myself as kind of, the thing that is executing it, the calling towards it. Like I'm just following the calling. It's not about me. This whole thing, what I'm building, is not about me, about my success. It is just this thing needs to be on the market, and that's fine. And that's how I saw things. So I think competition and why it's hard is because you take things personally, right? Because you put it on your success. You need to be successful because you need to achieve that. It's your ego that is having a problem with it if someone says your product is shit or the way you're handling things is stupid or stuff like that. But I never took it personally. Because I was just like, feeling like, okay, this is the way to go. And I didn't compare myself to anyone. I was just trying to make the best what I had, and have a healthy,
Yeah. And it sounds like, you had kind of a calling for that, right?
Yeah.
You just said it yourself. And I think if you have that strong calling, if you will, I think that helps a lot, because then you don't have to think about, what's my ego, blah, blah. You just go for it. But I think there's also loads of people out there, and I most definitely did not have a calling for consulting. There's also a lot of people who are out there who probably say, I don't even know what, she's talking about, because I don't have a calling. So how can I know my why? And I think it can be as simple as, I want to make money. This is why I'm here. Or I want to learn this specific skill. This is why I'm here.
But also, like, adding on that, yes, definitely. But then starting yourself questioning, okay, why do I want money? And
why do I want money?
I believe that this is important to me, because I think this is also undiscovering a lot of things that saying, okay, well, maybe that's a wrong assumption I had in my whole life, right? Is it self-worth? Is it because I believe that my life will be secure then at some point? Like, why do you want the money? Why do you want the status? And once you're aware of that, it's even easier to find out what you truly want.
And the answer and this is exactly the way to go, right? Remember, and I think I told you about this a few years back or so. I was like writing always. I started with why am I doing this, and then I was giving myself an answer, and then I was digging even deeper. And so why am I doing that, and then why am I reacting that to that? And eventually, you ask this question like 10 times, always going one level deeper. You get to your actual why, and your actual why is not to make money. It's, for example, it could be because I feel like I'm not self-worthy or so. I'm not worthy. So, therefore I need to do this. And I think this is exactly the right approach, but really starting with why you're doing this. And for example, now in the last, when I came back from my Singapore journey, I was considering going back into like normal employment. And my why, I was like writing this down again, like, why do I want to go there? Because I know my calling now is being an entrepreneur. I know this is my calling. I feel this very strongly. Still, I was considering going back. And the reason for that is because I felt like I need to get my foot back on the ground. I need to like calm down a little bit, have a few months of stable income, see my friends in London. That was my why. Not because I believe in consulting for the big companies. And I thought, that is a good enough why for me. And so therefore you can, I'm okay to go for it.
That's true. But
I'm not doing
I remember,
this, just for the record, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's true. No, when you told me that you're considering going back into consultancy, I was like, oh God, why would she? Even if you explained it to me, I was always like, and I was just like, it's so clear that this is not meant for you, but I totally get it. That along the way, you sometimes think or feel, okay, maybe I still do it now because I feel there is something bigger for me lined up, but it's not the moment yet. And I think, Corona was exactly the thing that saved you from being employed. Another way that you actually pictured it. But I think for sometimes it's okay. As long as it's just temporary and as you're always aware why you're doing things and
why you're doing exactly
coming up.
I think this is the key, that it comes down to knowing why you're doing this. Because if I would have blindly gone into taking another job in consulting, I would have surely after a year be like, this is all bullshit, I want to get out of it. Whereas with that mindset, I knew if I do take a consulting job, then it is for X, Y, Z reason. Now, luckily, there's also a lot of fear that was speaking out of me, to be honest. There's a lot of fear, like not being able to manage to become self-employed.
Of course.
So clearly that was a driver. But that was also my why. I was like, okay, I have fear to not being able to make it as an entrepreneur right away after I just failed a startup. I don't have the mental strength to do it again. So I'm fearful. So therefore I chose this path. And so that's how I think people can help themselves like navigating through those environments by asking those questions. And also, sorry, can I just
sure, Ed.
setting boundaries.
That's a
setting boundaries is super huge as well in that context.
There was one thing in your career what I remember, one of the toughest times when you were still in consulting, actually the one thing that that made you quit, and at some point as my perspective was because there was like some of the boundaries that were not respected from your side, from one of your colleagues back then. And despite trying to find a way, and you planned ahead, maybe in half a year from now I leave because I don't want to put up with it again, like for the next month. And then from one day to another I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. And it's just like, because you had those boundaries, and I was like, okay, this is enough. Like, and I love it when these things happen, and then life throws things at you that are very challenging in this moment, especially in those kind of environments where the support network is maybe not as strong because people are like having this competitive edge. And then it's just the best thing that happened to you. I mean, even if you go through a lot of pain in that moment, a lot of like personal growth in the same sense, right? And a lot of opportunities open just because because this environment overstepped your boundaries.
And the same situation happened to me again when I in Singapore with my co-founder. And I had, he overstepped the boundary. So there is no question for me to then say, oh, let's try to make it work. It's done. And I think, and then this is interesting also because I get feedback a lot from people who say, oh, you're so clear on this and you just do it. And I always think, it's really not that difficult because you need to set boundaries before. You cannot set boundaries in the moment. So when you go into a conflict and there's something that pisses you off and you have emotions, when you haven't, and then you'll be like, oh, I now set my boundaries. This is the wrong way. You need to know where your boundary is before, when you are like emotionally sober. When you don't have a conflict, when you don't have anything challenging, and then you have to set yourself, if this happens, for example, if somebody ever calls me a name and I escalate to my boss and my boss is not doing anything about it, then I need to go because this is a truly toxic environment. This is a boundary. So then that situation happens. You don't think, oh, should I try? Blah, blah, blah. No. They didn't fit the criteria, so you leave. Similar in my last case, I knew if this situation happens and if this person says this and does this, I'm out. You know how Barack Obama drops his mic? This is it, right? So boundary setting is really not that difficult, but you have to do it the right way.
But it requires self-worth. You need to know what you're worth, and you cannot be led by fear because obviously a lot of people, including me, we are driven by fears, especially if you're not aware of them, right? And in that sense, especially not even in a safe and corporate environment, also in a startup business, if you feel that if you would drop out just because, like in exclamation marks, is because someone called your name or because someone overstepped the boundary, you're giving up what you built. So it's a lot of like fear-driven decision making there because, I don't want to I invested so much, or I need this job, I need this income. So you would just cope with like the situation for longer or maybe forever because you fear that you are not getting anything better, this opportunity won't pop up and stuff like that. And I mean, I think my boundaries are not as strong as yours, and I keep up with a lot of things just because I think my tolerance for a lot of things and a lot of behaviors and a lot of circumstances are quite high in a sense. So I'm just like okay with it. But one thing what I learned is really there's always something better coming up. So even if it doesn't work out, and even especially if it doesn't feel right for a long term, don't be afraid of like taking this decision to leave. Like you did multiple times, because like literally life presents you with better choices.
Yes.
It's like always the thing, you hold on things. At some point, if you let go, you will get a reward for that braveness to just go away from your fears and say, okay, I'll just try my best to make a better situation out of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's fear-based. So that's why you don't.
And I think, as you say, like your boundaries are, for example, not as clear as mine, or that yours are maybe a bit more flexible, but you're aware of that. Again, this makes a whole difference, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to have like super strict boundaries. Like this works for me, that might not work for someone else. But you also know, okay, you know, this is what you want to see, and there's some flexibility. And if it's still within that flexibility window, you know, you're still okay to go for it or to leave it. And I think that's also a conscious choice. And then
as long as you're aware, right?
As long as you're aware.
And I think I never had the feeling that it's like towards my self-worth, so I never take things in that sense personally. It's a lot of like, you know, I'm aware of that. Okay, I can cope with it because I'm a strong person. This is the way as far as this goes, and then I can't anymore. And awareness and being conscious about what you can cope with and what's good for you and what not. I think this is the major thing about it. And I just wanted to add one thing, because we say a lot about why and asking why you should do things, and finding your kind of purpose, or at least some sense of what you want to do in life, or you should do, or you're supposed to do. I think one thing that really helped me was actually thinking about my values at some point, because I was a person, I was like you said in the beginning, in the last episode, was you saw very clearly that doesn't matter what like life throws at me, which kind of opportunities in a corporate environment, I would always go for the startup and for the community thing, which was true because I always felt like that, but I was never clear why. So at one point I got a job offer, and one thing that if you're working in a startup and community environment, there is not a lot of money in it, at least not how I do it. Maybe there are smarter people out there that make tons of money. I didn't. It was also never important, so I never earned tons. And then I got this opportunity presented while I still loved my job and loved what I do, to make like from my back then 30k or something euros a year, up to 100k. Like they offered me a job for 100k a year, and I was like, that's pretty a lot. And I could invest in a flat, and that's all the things that I wanted to do at some place. And I was like, damn it. And I really thought for it like maybe an hour, and I was like, yeah, it's so not me. And I was like 100% sure I could do the job. It sounded super interesting, but it was embedded in the corporate environment. It would allow me to some certain extent freedom, but my top values are freedom, which is it, happiness, and impact. And connection. But in that sense, impact was more important, and this job back then had like literally zero impact. And for me, like going for a job where I'm just doing something for the money, and this is how it felt like for me, right? Giving up the freedom I had with the accelerator that I led, and the impact I made with it, and this like connection I had to all the entrepreneurs, that was something for a job that just gave me money in at the end, was like, no. And then this person who was offering me the job was like, what, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, thanks. And everyone was like, how could you turn down a job with 100k, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know, like sounds stupid and sounds super, you know, unreasonable, but once you are clear about why you do things and about the values you have in your life, and once you write that down and really ask yourself, is this true? Is this really something that is important to me? Then it's like way easier also to decide upon that, because then you have it written down and see it.
I so agree with you on this, because I think a lot of people don't even know what their values are. They have never thought about it. They have never taken the time to write it down. Similarly with their boundaries, they don't know what their boundaries are. You don't necessarily have to write them down, but you have to know them. It helps to write them down too. And if you don't know all of these things, how are they making decisions? How are you making decisions, right?
Irrational, based on fear, based on impulses,
based on emotions.
On emotions. Yes, exactly. No, I think values and it's like tons of things that really helps you making better decisions. And I mean, for me, another decision-making thing is intuition, right? But that's also way stronger once you're aligned with the values.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the key for me is, or key takeaway from that is to never make decisions based on a temporary emotion, and take the time to write things down over time. Also what I do, because finding your values is not easy, so it's not a task where you'd be like, okay, I'm just going to do this straight away. You probably won't come up with it. But what I did to come up with my value system and stuff is, I have like on my notes, every time something pops up, I put it on that sheet, and it doesn't make any sense it didn't make any sense for many months, but then you see the same thoughts popping up and the same feelings, and then you feel like, oh, I think these are my values, and then you take the time to actually write them on a piece of paper, or so stick it to the wall. But I think a lot of people are even that's at least my experience that I made with other people that I know, or colleagues also, trying to write their values, and they're like, I don't know what my values are.
Yeah,
And it's too it's also too exhausting to think about this, because if they don't get an answer immediately, they feel like, oh, it's not meant for me. You need to know, like, the answer doesn't come immediately.
Yeah, and also in terms of business, and for all founders, like listening to the podcast, I think it really helps a lot also to have your own personal values, obviously, but also then the business values. And that's something that I learned with my businesses. And the last years I led tons of different communities. And I think one thing why I managed, or we as like communities or companies behind it managed to attract the right people, was because the values was underlying there, even if they were not on the website, we never wrote them down, because my thing is like the impact thing and this connection. So everything I build is based on those pillars, and also the freedom part, right? Mm-hmm. That's just so close to me and to my heart. That's why I'm like kind of projecting it also on the companies I build. And we started a female-led community last year, me and my co-founder, and that was also, we were so clear on the values, and we did like an exercise in the very beginning when we started it to just make sure, okay, is this something that we are aligned on, and is this something that we want the company to build upon? And like now 1 year in, the resume is, if we talk to our employees, and we really have such a kick-ass team, I love them, and if you ask them why they joined, it was exactly because of those values. And it's sometimes it's not, okay, they are on our website, but not in a big scale. But everything what we do is reflected on these values. And this is something they feel so strongly, and that our members also feel so strongly, and all the supporters we have. And I think like really sitting down and thinking about your personal values, and then also thinking about the business values if you start one. And also as employee, you can contribute to that. That's just something that just makes sense in a business context as well, because that means success. And if you don't
100%.
have that, you don't have a direction, you don't know where you do things, And so it's not even that you shouldn't like think about it. It's something, especially in a business environment, is so important.
100%. And then from an employee perspective, again, when you know about your values and you know your company's values,
yeah,
and then you are able to thrive in a competitive environment as well, because you know why you are doing this, you know why the company is doing it, and if it's aligned, then great, you're able to stick things through. Whereas if you basically go into it blind, and the company is also going into it blind, guaranteed this is only going to take a short while until one is diverting.
It was also so interesting. Back then I worked for Booking.com a couple of years ago, and I love the spirit of the company. It's great. I mean, they put the customer first. They have like really great values also internally, and that's something I identified very strongly with it. I love Booking.com. I booked so many travel things around them, so I admired them for what they built in the last years. And it was like 100% aligned with what I wanted to build. I loved the team and everything, so it was really, really great. However, there's like one, and that's something, if you feel so misaligned, it was just one thing. They hadn't had the freedom part of it. Mm-hmm. So they had a very strict thing of how employees should behave in a thing, and how you need to maintain like the whole structure of their employees. And me being a freedom living person, I thrive when I have my flexibility and if I can do what I want. And that did not go together. Mm-hmm. And within 3 months, I quit the job that was actually really good and interesting, but I couldn't. It was something that was so misaligned for me. It was crazy. And imagine that there were good paycheck. It was great people, great leaders, fun team, great work, great company, good values, but this one thing and value was missing, like trusting your employees fully that they can make the right decision in a like freer atmosphere. Meh, I'm done.
It's crazy. The power of values, honestly, I really do think they're completely underestimated by most people.
Completely.
So what you're describing, like this, having this one value that doesn't stick through, it is, I mean, I can see how it can break apart. And I also recently had this with, like there was one value that was fundamentally disaligned with my co-founder. And I saw the importance of aligning values, and he had a different value system. And so he was trying to impose his values on me. Mm-hmm. He just didn't understand that is not how I function. And eventually, it was always coming up. It was always coming up. And this is eventually where I was like, you are now stepping over my boundaries, and so, and I just thinking out of that, what is that you can learn from it is you really got to pay attention to these things. And this is not like a fluffy thingy or so.
No.
This is something where you should spend some serious time on.
Yeah, definitely.
And once you get started, you realize, I can't write down my top 3 values straight away. So it's probably a deeper task than I thought.
Yeah, no, but it's again about reflecting, right? And this is some practice that I also get very much with the spirituality part, reflecting upon why you do things, why you value things, why you feel the way you do, why emotions are popping up, why you're getting triggered, like always questioning it. I mean, it sounds bad that you always question yourself, but it makes sense to actually get over your mind and to go deeper in why you feel certain things and why you react towards certain things. And that's specifically true with values. And I love it because some people, and including me in the beginning, we have our lifestyle values that we think are important to us. That's just because, it sounds fancy, or, that's just how you got what you got out when you grew up, because if your parents were like this and that, or your culture was so strong in your life. And to also reflect on that, is this really something that resonates with me, based on values, is also something that is super important, to not just like buy whatever comes to you first, but to really think, is this even a value, or is it really my value? And is it really my belief that I have, or is it something that society made me believe? And being like aware of that is also important.
There's a list of I think 100 values also that you can Google when you say values or so. This is a really good starting point to pick like a few out. And I would also say, like, I have 10 values in total, but not all of them always need to be present and like this is just unrealistic. I want to find all my 10 values reflected in whatever I do, so there needs to be a prioritization of things. But I was also going through that list and thinking, okay, I think this makes sense, and these are my top 3 values, and they are non-negotiable for me in a business context, in a private context and stuff. So I think if anyone struggles who's maybe listening to this and thinking, I don't know what my values are, then I think Brené Brown also wrote that list.
There are tons of them.
Google them, like 100 top values, and then really thinking like, okay, now I've picked a value. For example, a value can be family. So what does family as a value mean? Means you want to prioritize things differently. It means you maybe need to find a new role in your job or so, because definitely. It doesn't serve it. So
True. I mean, because we are like on 35-ish minutes in, 7. And I would say we could wrap this up, because I think we shared a lot of our wisdom already. And I'm trying to summarize the 3 key takeaways out of that. I'm saying it's for sure how to thrive, like 3 key takeaways how to thrive in a competitive environment, even as a spiritual person, is for sure, first, have your values straight and think about them and decide towards them. Asking yourself why, and making sure that you're doing the things and you're staying in this environment because of the right reasons, they're true to your heart. And number 3 is set boundaries, so you know when it's enough that you coped with and you should leave this competitive environment. And I think one thing to sum it up is also, like, try to have fun and only do it if you really feel there's a strong reason why you do it, and otherwise just leave. And life has better opportunities for you once you're getting better aligned with what you really want to do.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens once you start aligning the pieces.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
We've seen this over the years for ourselves.
We'll do another podcast episode on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
Awesome. Okay, then stay tuned for next week. The topic is unclear yet, but we'll figure it out. It will be for sure cool.
For sure, yeah. Stay tuned. We will be back shortly.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.